Could an Aggie be headed to Tiger Town? We've got the latest. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. LSU basketball on the road at Mizzou. We've got a thumbnail preview for you. A college football analyst loves LSU in 2025. We'll let you hear from him in just a little bit. But one of the things we've talked about a good bit here is LSU addressing the transfer portal. Before I go any further, let me remind you, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So we've talked a good bit about the LSU transfer portal class and how the Tigers still are not done. If you were here on the previous episode, we talked to you about both Keontae Scott and Tamarcus Cooley, a couple of defensive backs that LSU is targeting in the transfer portal that will visit this week. And I think that's really significant because I've said here many times, LSU will not kick off against Clemson next August without adding a safety in the portal. It's going to happen. Whether it's in this cycle, the spring cycle, or some other way, LSU is going to add a safety to this roster before they kick off next season against Clemson. Well, part of what I've shared with you, though, is my portal theory about how LSU is just not going to get caught holding the bag. So they're going to be aggressive in their pursuit of players. So it was interesting, I think, for many when Texas A&M tight end Donovan Green entered the portal, and then we learned that Donovan Green is going to visit LSU this week. And this is interesting because LSU's already got tight ends. We looked at Bauer Sharp as one of the first portal additions that LSU made. As a matter of fact, LSU, with Mason Taylor going pro, and all four tight ends from that 2023 signing class, all now gone. LSU was desperate. The only scholarship tight end you had on the roster at the end of the regular season was J.D. LaFleur coming in, because remember, TurboTax Green had moved to wide receiver. Well, fast forward. You've added Bauer Sharp from Oklahoma, one of the top portal tight ends in the class, 1 year of eligibility remaining. He is a plug and play. Let's go. Led Oklahoma in receptions and receiving yards at nearly 50 receptions this year. I mean, you have a plug and play guy there in Bauer Sharp. TurboTax Green goes out in the bowl game and was a stud, not only in the pass catching game, but showed he could be attached. He could inline block, needs to continue to grow there. But as Brian Kelly said, they sort of, he got sandpapered a bit. They're working him into that role. But you have those two guys, and then you add J.D. LaFleur coming in. So you could look at a guy like Donovan Green and go, well, how does he fit? Why would he pick LSU? Let me give you a little backstory on Donovan Green first, and then we'll explain how we're kind of going to arrive at this point. So Donovan Green signed with Texas A&M as a consensus four-star in the class of 2022. He was an Under Armour All-American, out of the Houston area. So a 6'4", 265-pounder. He is the prototype, right? He's the guy that Brian Kelly loves, the guy that's athletic enough to run routes and catch the football, but big enough to be attached and be an inline blocker, right? Just think Kittle, Kelsey, those types of players in the NFL. That's Gronk. Like, that's what Brian Kelly wants out of his tight ends. Tyler Eifert, Mason Taylor became that at LSU, put on size and that was always a great pass catcher, but became a really good blocker. That's what you're getting in Bauer Sharp. Well, this is Donovan Green, okay? 6'4", 265, Under Armour All-America, shows up at Texas A&M in 2022 as a true freshman, plays in 10 games, starts 4 of the 10 games that he played in as a freshman. He went out there as a true freshman and played quite well for Texas A&M. In that 2022 season, has 22 catches for 233 and a couple of scores. Again, true freshman. Well, then in 2023, there was an awful lot of expectation around Donovan Green to build on that freshman season, and he suffered an ACL injury in fall camp. So he didn't play at all in 2023, took the red shirt. This year, as a sophomore in 2024, third-year sophomore, plays in 7 games, but mostly on special teams, and didn't have a reception. Again, remember, new coaching staff there with Mike Elko coming in, replacing Jimbo Fisher's staff. And Green just didn't have a role within the offense. So he enters the transfer portal, and now he's visiting LSU. And part of me looks at this and goes, why would Donovan Green want to come to LSU if he's entering his 4th year of college and LSU's already added Bauer Sharp, who's got 1 year of eligibility remaining, and you've also got Trey'Dez Green there? Like, the path to the field isn't clear. But then it starts to make sense a little bit as I've sort of theorized on some of this other stuff. So if you were here for the last episode, and to all of you everydayers, thank you so much for that. We talked about Tamarcus Cooley. So Tamarcus Cooley, and if you missed it, I'd highly recommend you go back and listen. But Tamarcus Cooley is a defensive back from NC State. Redshirted as a freshman, didn't see the field in 2023. Then in 2024, played in every game, played over 700 defensive snaps for NC State. When you look at what LSU has already done in the secondary, and they've added Mansour Delane, they've added Jakeem Jackson, you've got DJ Pickett coming in. I'm just talking corners here, but you obviously have brought in Keontae Scott on a visit from Auburn. You're going to add safety help. You've got Jordan Gilbert coming back. You've got Deshaun Spears. My point is, there's also not a super clear path to the field as well for Tamarcus Cooley immediately, but that's a guy who could get a very handsome NIL deal to come to LSU. And maybe similar to Michael Van Buren from Mississippi State, the quarterback, knows he's probably going to come sit behind Nussmeier, have a nice NIL package anyway, and have the opportunity to start in 2026. So maybe that's what Tamarcus Cooley is doing. And then also, you think of it in terms of LSU, Brian Kelly's saying, over the last 2 recruiting classes, you've lost a quarter of your class each of those years. Well, what you've lost in turn, as you've supplemented in the portal and signed young guys again in the most recent signing class, what you've lost is your young depth, right? You've lost those guys that have been on campus for a year and 2. So maybe that's what you're looking at with Tamarcus Cooley, is you could say, all right, well, even if he picks LSU, he's not maybe going to make a huge impact in 2025, but he fills that gap and he's ready to go in 2026. So you don't have to go back into the portal for another guy and reintroduce him to your program. I kind of think that might be the same thing with Donovan Green. Yes, he's entering his 4th year, but remember, while he's already used his red shirt, that could technically be a medical red shirt year. So he's got 2 seasons remaining to play. Remember, you got 5 to play 4. So he's taken his red shirt. So he's got 2 years of eligibility remaining, and possibly 3 if he wants to apply for a medical red shirt. So Donovan Green could be looking at a situation at LSU where he goes, okay, Brian Kelly features the tight end. He just developed Mason Taylor. He's pumped more guys into the NFL during his dozen years at Notre Dame than LSU had in the previous 40 years. He loves 2 tight end sets as well. Go look at Brian Kelly's history at Notre Dame. He loves to play with 2 tight end sets, and it's something that he wanted to do this year, but struggled because you didn't have another tight end outside of Mason Taylor. A lot of times what they did was they put Bo Bordelon in a tight end's jersey and used him to block. Well, if you had a blocking tight end who also can catch the ball, even better. So Donovan Green maybe could see the field this year, but beyond that, Bauer Sharp's gone after this year. And that would be a clear path to the field in 2026 for Donovan Green. So maybe part of what we're seeing here is LSU's roster building strategy. I know I've used a lot of words, but let me boil it down for you really simply here. When Brian Kelly showed up, he was pretty adamant. His vision was to build and develop through the high school ranks and supplement with the portal. And initially, they had to go heavy in the portal to rebuild the roster. And each year subsequent, we saw them reduce the number of portal additions. Last year, it was only 9. Well, they probably went too light. They overcorrected. 15 is probably the right number. And it's probably where they're going to land. They're at 14 now. They'll probably land 15, 16. We'll see where it is. But I think what you're seeing is you're going to recruit out of the high school ranks and develop, and you hope a lot, and the majority of that class will stay. But if every year a quarter of your players enter the transfer portal, then after 2 years, half of your signing class from those 2 years is gone. You sign a class as freshmen, a quarter of them leave after 1 year, a quarter of them leave after 2 years. Well, your young depth is gutted. So instead of going into the portal every year to supplement numbers, what it kind of looks like he's doing here is targeting young veterans in the portal to say, come be part of our culture, pay you NIL, play when you can, maybe win a job, or maybe you're in a reserve role. But next year is when you have your opportunity to go ham, and maybe that NIL deal is a 2-year contract that's going to make sure that they stay for a couple of seasons. I don't know that definitively, but it sure looks like that's how they're approaching this. So you don't have to go so heavy in numbers on immediate impact guys every year in the portal like they're having to do right now. It looks like they're getting those immediate impact guys, but also looking to replace the young depth that they've lost in their signing classes that have left. So you have those guys within your program, developing in your strength conditioning program, in your culture, in your system, in your weight training program. And it's going to alleviate the losses next year, potentially. We'll see what happens with Donovan Green, if ultimately he picks LSU or goes somewhere else. But if you have to, but it begs the question, when you've already added Bauer Sharp, and you've got Trades Green, 2 guys that you expect are going to be major contributors for you next year, why are you looking at another tight end? I don't think it's for 2025. I think it's for 2026. Just file that away as we continue to move through this process. Okay, it is Locked on LSU. Thanks so much for being here with us. Speaking of 2025, one national analyst loves LSU in 2025. I had a chance to talk to him. Let's hear some of what he said as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, y'all. If you are thinking about attending the new 12-team college football playoff, what an incredible experience. Brings fans together like never before. The excitement of past playoff games. Man, if you can't wait to make new memories with this updated format and extra teams involved, you got to check out Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I used Game Time Picks when I was looking for tickets for the Sugar Bowl back in the Superdome with Notre Dame and Georgia. Browsing through the deals was a breeze. You can find great value on all kinds of seats around the venue. The Super Deal in particular, it stands out as the best value for that specific event. I love that you can see the seat views before you buy the tickets, and the app shows you the total cost upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Plus, the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gives you complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Well, there's been a ton of excitement around LSU for the 2025 season, in particular because of who LSU has returning and obviously the additions of this portal class. And quite a few national analysts are taking note. As a matter of fact, in the 24/7 sports transfer portal rankings, LSU is the number 1 class, Texas Tech number 2, just like everybody drew it up, right? Well, Brad Crawford over at 24/7 Sports, part of CBS Network, had a piece that's up right now. If you want to go read it, it's really well done. He talked about who his big winner was in this transfer portal cycle. And you can guess that we're talking about it here. He said his big winner in this portal cycle was LSU. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it is because it's one thing for you and me to talk about it. Listen, I went to LSU. I love LSU. I want LSU to win all the time. I'll call a spade a spade. If I think they're good, I'll tell you. If I think they're bad, I'll tell you. And I think you know that about me. But third-party validation is always more powerful. When someone not directly connected or emotionally tied to the conversation can validate your feelings or your opinions, it's going to carry more weight. So Brad Crawford's got nothing to do with LSU. He's a national analyst for 24/7 and CBS Sports, and he said LSU was the biggest winner in the portal cycle. So I asked Brad, had a chance to talk to him on my radio show After Further Review. Then you get the whole conversation if you search After Further Review on YouTube or podcast. But I asked him what he liked about the offense, the defense, and then we talked about 2025. Here's what he said he liked the most about the offense.
I think LSU has massively upgraded at the wide receiver position. Barian Brown is a guy that several SEC programs wanted. Not only is he going to help out in the speed department on LSU's offense, but he is going to be undoubtedly one of the SEC's top special teamers. Like the Destin Hill from Florida State, he's a guy who maybe hasn't had the career yet that a lot of us thought he would, but I think that he can break out in Baton Rouge. And then one of the big ones is Nick Anderson. Oklahoma did not need to lose him. Now the Sooners have one of the worst wide receiver groups in the SEC heading into 2025. So LSU has upgraded significantly at wide receiver, and they spent a lot of money on defense too.
It was interesting that when I asked Brad what he liked most about the portal class, he immediately went to receiver. That's how I asked. I said, what do you like most about this class? And he talked about the receivers. And what's interesting is LSU had some struggles on offense this year. Naturally, they struggled to run the football. They struggled with the vertical threat. And Barian Brown and Nick Anderson addressed that. But LSU's big issue this year wasn't offense. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier threw for 4,000 yards on the season, and LSU averaged over 30 points. That wasn't the issue LSU had. Now, talk about the offensive line. According to 24/7, you got the top two interior offensive linemen in this portal class with Braylon Moore and Josh Thompson, and they may not be done there on the offensive line as well. But where LSU desperately needed help, in my opinion, was on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, that's where you've not been elite at corner. You were very bad at safety. You were thin at linebacker, although Whit Weeks had a first-team All-SEC season where he had over 100 tackles. You were good at defensive end, and you were solid at defensive tackle. But make no mistake, defense is where you needed to upgrade. But one of the things Brad mentioned, and this was sort of a sneaky stat that I probably didn't know, and many of you might not have as well, but LSU led the country in pressure rate. It's incredible. I mean, that's one of the things Blake Baker aimed to do is he calls it havoc rate, but it was all about creating havoc. Oh, you're going to give up yards, you're going to give up points, but you're going to create opportunities by creating negative plays as well. And LSU did that statistically better than any team in the country. And as Brad talked about, they're going to be even better at it next year.
Yeah, I think Mansour Delane from Virginia Tech and Jakeem Jackson from Florida, two cornerbacks. I mean, they're going to be instantly in the two deep there at LSU. Cornerback has been a bad position, let's face it, the past couple of years, really since Derek Stingley left. LSU has not had an elite player at the position, so they're going to get better in the secondary. And then Jack Pyburn from Florida at edge. I mean, he's a guy that the Gators did not want to lose, but to be honest with you, LSU just paid more, and Florida said, we're gonna back off. So he's a guy that I think can have an 8 or 9 sack season for LSU's defense. And like you said, man, that side of the football, if LSU intends on making the playoff, it has to be elite.
And they've certainly built up elite talent at every level of the defense. That's one of the things that's most exciting. We've talked about the interior defensive line at tackle, and the only addition there has been Sadir Mitchell. I think that goes to show you Bo Davis is quite comfortable and confident with the guys he has. Guys like Dom McKinley, Ahmad Bro, and then getting Jacoby and Guillory back. Feels like he's got enough there. You've added the elite ends that we've talked about. You've got Whit Weeks coming back, obviously, with West Weeks, Harold Perkins, Devon Keys. You feel good, Charles Ross coming in the top 100 overall player at linebacker. We've talked plenty about corner. You heard Brad just mention a couple of guys you've added there. That doesn't even include DJ Pickett or Ashton Stamps coming back. They've added Mansour Delane, who might play safety, and they're going to add safety. I'll continue to say that. Like LSU, you can clip this. You can put it anywhere you want. LSU will not kick off against Clemson next year without adding another safety in this portal class. It's got to happen. So yes, they need to do that. But the guys you've added, as you mentioned, with, Patrick Payton, Jack Pyburn at edge, not to even mention Jamari Butler, you've created a lot of value there at your ability to rush the passer there at the edge. And one more from Brad Crawford, because he also 24/7 asked him to do the exercise of creating a 2025 season college football playoff bracket. What would the bracket look like for next season? And he had LSU as the 7 seed hosting 10 seed Miami. Playoff game in Death Valley. Could you imagine? Here's how Brad came to that conclusion.
Yeah, this would likely be LSU either finishing SEC runner-up to Texas, who is my SEC preseason favorite, or, perhaps being a 10-2 team somewhere in that log jam of second and third place teams. LSU's a team in 2025. I look at them a lot like I look at this 2024 Ohio State team. 9 months ago, Ohio State was my preseason favorite to win it all because they spent $20 million on this roster. Now, it took Ryan Day several months to get this team to play at a level that warrants that much spending. But I think Brian Kelly has a staff in place, and Brian Kelly has said on the record that he expects to be in the playoffs next season. 2 years ago at Media Days, I talked to Brian Kelly, and he did not have that same expectation. 2 years later, he feels the roster's at a spot now with NIL where he can get it. So the LSU schedule, it begins at Clemson. That's a game that I think LSU has to win to be one of those at-large playoff teams.
So remember what Brad said there. He thinks LSU would be an at-large playoff team, probably finishing as the SEC runner-up to Texas, who, by the way, he did have Texas and Ohio State playing in the national championship next year as part of his pick. But, again, that would intimate that he got LSU beating Clemson in that opener and getting all the way to the SEC championship game before falling to Texas. But listen, no matter how you get in, I've said it, we'll continue to say it here all throughout this offseason. LSU's baseline expectation in 2025 is the college football playoff. Now, can you win it? That's going to depend on your draw and a lot of things. I'll continue to mention Oregon. Oregon had the best season, was probably the most complete team all season, but they just got an awful draw, and they lost in the Rose Bowl to Ohio State, who's playing better than anybody right now. So your draw matters. Look at Penn State. Penn State's not the best team in the country, but they got to play SMU, Boise, and now they get to play Notre Dame. They've got the easiest path to the final. Now, can they get there? We'll see. But your draw matters. But what you can control is playing well enough and winning enough games to get yourself into a 12-team playoff, and that is going to be the baseline expectation for LSU in 2025. Okay, I kind of hoped the baseline expectation for the LSU men's basketball team would be the NCAA tournament. Boy, that feels like a shaky pick right now. Tigers are back at it Tuesday against Missouri. We'll give you a thumbnail preview next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Visit FanDuel right now. You want to bet on the playoffs? You can. You got 3 days of games coming up this weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday Night Football. You can bet on it all right now at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. LSU basketball team back on the court Tuesday on the road at Missouri. A winnable game, but certainly not a game where LSU is going to be favored, unfortunately. The Tigers on the road against the Tigers, and LSU is a 7.5-point underdog in this ball game against Mizzou, and rightfully so. This is a game that LSU can win. They're obviously not favored to win, as LSU is a 7.5-point underdog, and the Tigers, according to ESPN's analytics, Missouri has a 63% chance of winning this game, so that equates to just about 37% chance for LSU. Both teams have identical records. Missouri is 11-3. LSU is 11-3. Both teams are nicknamed and mascot the Tigers as well. And statistically, they're very comparable. LSU averages 83 a game. Missouri 85. Missouri allows 68 a game. LSU allows 67 a game. Field goal percentage, almost identical. Mizzou 50% from the floor. LSU 48%. Rebounds, slight edge to LSU 40-34. Assists, LSU 14-13. The big difference in this ball game is the stat that is and should concern everybody. What we talked about with Vanderbilt coming in a few days ago was Vanderbilt's defense leading the country in steals. Now, as of now, they're third in the country at 10.7 steals per game. UTEP and UC San Diego are the only two who are better at stealing the basketball than Vanderbilt. Well, fourth in the country is Samford, then South Alabama, and the sixth best team in the country at steals is your opponent Tuesday night, the Missouri Tigers. So in your first two league games, you're facing two unranked teams, but you're facing the two teams in the SEC that are the best in the league and among the best in the country at creating turnovers and stealing the basketball. Meanwhile, LSU turns it over more than 13 times per game. This isn't hard. Trying to figure out this game is going to be quite easy. Both teams shoot it about the same. LSU's a little better rebounding and assisting. Missouri steals the basketball and LSU turns it over. Missouri hasn't lost on their home floor this year. They are undefeated at home. Missouri is this year. And they're 11-0. And Missouri is 9-2 when they win the turnover battle, and they average nearly 11 turnovers a game. Missouri's 9-2 when they win the turnover battle. Missouri's net is 45, better than LSU's. By the way, Missouri's three losses this year, they lost at Memphis, they lost at a neutral site against Illinois, and then they lost at number 2 Auburn to open SEC play, and they lost that game by 16 points, 84-68. There's no crime in losing to number 2 Auburn, who might be the best team in college basketball. So again, their three losses are at Memphis, neutral site against Illinois, and at Auburn. They haven't lost on their home floor. So they've been challenged. They played a tougher strength of schedule than LSU's played one of the weakest non-conference strengths of schedule in the country. We all thought that unfortunately, we thought that the Kansas State win for LSU was a really nice road win, and it did look like it early in the season. But Kansas State right now is just 7-6 overall, and they're 1-1 in the conference, having beaten Cincinnati and then lost at TCU. Now, the Cincinnati win is a nice win, but they lost to LSU, they lost to Liberty, and then lost 3 straight to St. John's, Drake, and Wichita State, 2 of those on the road. But the point is, Missouri's played a more difficult schedule, and they do the thing that has given you the most issues. They are really good at stealing the basketball, and LSU does not protect it. So if you're going to have a chance to win this game, you've got to protect the basketball and cut down the turnovers. I just don't know how many road wins there are for LSU on this schedule. Somebody is going to finish 4-14, 3-15 in the conference. It's just how it has to be. It's just the way the numbers are going to work. And when you look at the league, maybe South Carolina, certainly in the net, South Carolina is the only team lower than LSU. But there just aren't a lot of games that you look at and say, yep, that's one LSU should get. A home game against Vanderbilt was one of those, and you lost at home by 8. Now you got to go to Missouri, to Ole Miss. You're home against Arkansas. Then you're at A&M and at Bama. I mean, 4 of your next 5 are on the road, and you may dig yourself a hole that you're not able to get out of before the calendar even flips to February. I hate to say it that way, but when there are opportunities against the schedule to get gettable games, you got to get them. And they missed that opportunity on Saturday against Vanderbilt, and you got to make it good here against Missouri. Because if you don't, there's a very real possibility of staring down this gauntlet coming up with 4 of your next 5 on the road, and wondering where are you going to get a win. So Tigers have an opportunity. They're a 7.5-point road dog at Missouri. Let's see if they can go upset some, shock some people, upset Missouri, and get in the win column here in conference play. Okay, that'll do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. Thanks so much for making this your first listen. Now for your second listen, how about you go check out my guy Chris Gordy over at Locked On SEC on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. If you are listening on podcasts, thank you so much. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow by leaving your comment below. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.